and okay, so it's a meeting.
Yep. Okay. I'm trying to find the agenda here.
Are you on your phone?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Joshua, how does that work?
I can find it. I can find it online.
Yeah, you can either find it in your email or online, or I'm not sure if you can see my screen, but I also have it pulled up.
Yeah. You know, I'm so bad at technology, guys. Okay, here, you know what? Here it is. It's small. Here, and here's the agenda. Darn it.
And while we're waiting, Cheryl, Mark Harshbarger is in listen mode. He called in. He's on the phone.
Okay.
I got it. Okay, it's up here. My apologies, everybody. This story of my life recently, a story of all of our lives. I hope everybody's doing well. I mean that. Okay. Shall we begin? Okay. Yes. We call our workshop to order. Or wait a second. Metropolitan.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's do roll call.
Okay. Committee members present: Councilman Vieira, Deborah LaQuinta, Craig Purcell, Cassandra Blaylock.
Here.
David Newell.
Here.
Emily Hugart.
Here.
Len Brown.
Here.
Jody Toner.
Here.
John Pelkey. Christina Melling.
Here.
Dr. Leslie Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Mark Harshbarger. Mike Lacey.
Present.
Okay, I think that is all the committee members I see.
Okay, so we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Madam. And you know what I neglected to do? We always begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's go ahead and do that, if I may. I pledge allegiance and stand, if you're able to do so, of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Okay, I would assume there's no public comment, but I'll still ask for that. Is there any public comment?
If there's any public comment, feel free to raise your hand. It doesn't look like there's anyone from the public and attendees.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we'll move to workshop presentations. Michelle and Joshua, if y'all want to proceed, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, and thank you all very much for attending. We have a full board almost here, and I'm very excited that we actually achieved quorum and everyone's here mostly.
It looks like Craig showed up as well.
Yes, here.
He's self-muted, so.
Yeah, he's here. So let's start the presentation. The workshop is a requirement of our contract and procedures with the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged. And we have several new members of the board, so I thought I would take the time on this one to just do a refresher's course on the Transportation Disadvantaged. Next slide, please. So the local coordinating board, or the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board, they call different names throughout the state, but always coordinating board is a common piece. It has been established by state law and is established to identify the local service needs and provide information, advice, and direction of this coordinated system that the state of Florida has created, and it's about 40 years old. In the next slide, we talk about, well, who are the transportation disadvantaged? They are our parents and grandparents over the age of 60, seniors, low-income people, persons with disabilities, and children at risk. Next slide. And the transportation disadvantaged advises the MPO board, in which we nest, the Board of County Commission as the CTC, or the you never can say the right thing, commission, the coordinator, the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged, and the Sunshine Line, HART, the Florida legislators, and all policy bodies. So we have wide range and try to have dialogue and with many people, because transportation touches everything in our lives. Next slide, please. The service, as I said, is a coordinated system. Each one of you represents a part of that system. The health department is required to be part of this system. ACA, area aging services, you're all part of that coordinated system, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. The Board of County Commission is the CTC, or Transportation Coordinator. The Sunshine Line is the operator. We provide door-to-door service and bus passes that are bought from HART. And within there as well are coordinated contractors, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in the next slide. This is an organizational chart. It's hard to really see very well on my screen, and I apologize. It is what it is. But it talks about the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged receives funds from the legislature every year out of a trust fund, and they then contract to provide trips at the local level. With the Community Transportation Coordinator, and that's the Board of County Commission with the operator as a Sunshine Line, they also have established the designated planning agency, also called the BOTA. It was funny. And we, as the planning agency, the MPO, provide feedback to the commission and carry out designated programs and tasks to provide feedback to ensure accountability. In this system are those who buy or purchase trips as well, such as Children and Family Services, Aging Services. Hillsborough County government also buys some trips. And then we have those who or purchase them. And then there are those who are coordinated contractors. They are providing trips to their particular clients, but are in the system because they do receive 5310, which is the New Freedom monies, and David Newell will be giving us an update on that very shortly. And so it's, you know, a little system that works to try and get people rides. We purchase, I think everyone purchases trips through bus passes from HART, and so we coordinate with them, but most of the system is in the blue. And hopefully the public doesn't even know the difference. I hope. Next slide, please. So there are certain duties that are required of this board. One of them is a coordinator evaluation that we just completed in February. We do a no, come back, please. Thank you. A disadvantaged service plan that we will bring to you in June. Today, we will be reviewing grievance procedures and bylaws. The annual operating report is provided to you in October. We have 6 meetings a year. We do dialogue and community issues in our venue, and we've done some of those. As those of you who've been around longer and not so new to this board, you know that that's something we do. We advocate for cross-county trips, and we advocate for rides. Next. Today I'd like to talk to you
Please mute yourself. Hold on. Jordan,
If anybody who is not muted, please mute your line. Thank you. Unless if you're going to be talking, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So today we'd like to give you some overview on the tri-county, that cross-county trip talk. And Joshua will be talking to you a little bit in a few minutes about the regional mobility pilot project that just ended. And then we can have some discussion if it's the will of the board. Next slide. So I wanted to educate you a little about this cross-county trip desire of Hillsborough County. Back in 2006, monies were available and it was a requirement of our local planning group to create a tri-county access plan. It defined unmet needs in the community and established projects to address the needs. And this was, as I said, was created in 2006. In 2009, the normal planning agency, we update. And with, and I should have said also that it was a tri-county effort with Pasco and Pinellas counties, local coordinating boards also assisting. In 2009, a new plan was updated. It reevaluated needs. It developed strategies to address needs, and was implemented with 2 funding sources: Job Access Reverse Commute, which is JARC, and a New Freedom funds that had come available in that time period. In 2012, Hillsborough County's the board at that time, asked staff to start reaching out to Pasco and Pinellas and have a tri-county meeting that would talk about implementing the needs that had been identified in the 2009 plan. And so this is where we start talking about what happened next. Next, please. Being a planning effort, of course, we have to do an update because 2009 was a long time ago, and for 2012, and so we started to update. The results of the update was that we saw immediately the very big differences between the 3 groups. For Pasco, they wanted more local service. They wanted to be able to travel with transit and door-to-door services. And in Pinellas, they wanted to cross county lines and come to Hillsborough County and travel for jobs and other things. And in Hillsborough, who has been weighing in the longest and the most in this process. We have, for example, there were 70 people who participated in the surveys and so on versus the other counties. In Hillsborough County, we wanted access. We wanted rides, We wanted to find a way to enjoy the quality of life that Tampa Bay offers. So, and they wanted more flex routes, and that was a great time to talk about those things. They wanted infrastructure like sidewalks and bus shelters, and so that they could access also and take advantage of our transit system. Next slide. Thank you. So in 2014, we earnestly began to talk about finding a way to implement the needs of our 3-county area. One of the things that, as we began this journey, the job access reverse commute and the new freedom went away. And I'll remember that when that happened, and I said to Beth Alden, "Oh, but it's just moving into 5310 and into the transit system." And Beth gave me a look and said, "They're gone." And she was right. Anyway, so we established, the 3 boards established a subcommittee called the Tri-County Local Coordinating Board Subcommittee, and we have been meeting since 2014 quarterly, and I'll bring you up to date on the efforts that that group has tried to implement. The first thing that we did was, because we now only had 5310 money, we asked FDOT to use the scoring process in that 5310 funding source to prioritize cross-county trips, and that was achieved. We also created, at that time, Hillsborough County, the Sunshine Line, different groups, disability advocate groups, helped to create a group called the Quality of Life Partnership. And they got money out of 5310 and were able to provide cross-county trips at a very exemplary rate, and we were very happy with the results. And this board received updates on it in that time period. Regrettably, there were some issues that were faced by Quality of Life, and they have been unable to provide us any further much assistance. I won't say any further, but much assistance. We did some work with T-BARTA, had come online at this time, and we coordinated with them and asked for their assistance. We tried to work with a scheduling platform where the CTCs would coordinate with each other, and maybe, someone needs to get into Pinellas, and their transit system could, go fund and pick up someone, take them where they needed to go. But we had to have the same scheduling system. That turned out to be rather expensive, and we were unable to fund that. We had new partnerships with the coordinating contractors, which have joined in and been helpful in any way they can. But that has been, that's still an embryo, let's say it that way. We tried to find new funding sources. The state has provided new funding sources, but we have not been able to realize that in Hillsborough County or in the Tampa Bay area. And finally, we working and really with our partnership with FDOT, who has been really wonderful in supporting this effort these many years. They said, well, maybe we can work with the CTCs and provide a little extra funding through 5310 for cross-county trips. In June, I will bring a more thorough update to you. We, as the MPO staffs of Pinellas and Pasco and Hillsborough, are working on how to land this plane and give our boards some more recommended direction. But I just wanted you to know that this is the background of what this board, the leadership of this board has been, and let's see where we go. Now, the next slide, I did want to acknowledge that our son has been providing cross-county trips when feasible, so people get a ride into Pasco and into is cheaper because, you know, we have this huge 1,000 square mile county and people everywhere. So if it's cheaper to run the requested ride into one of the other counties rather than bring them into, say, downtown or town and country if they're in East Hillsborough or North Hillsborough, then that's being done. And I'd really like to acknowledge that Scott Clark and his staff have been wonderful in working through that and really, you know, providing those trips. The other thing is that children at risk were a part of what we needed to talk about. And Scott rolled up his sleeves and found a way. And here are some children going on a ride, on a little adventure, who are foster children in home. And I want to celebrate that as well in this workshop. We're giving rides as we continue to struggle with getting those cross-county trips to be a norm. Joshua is going to give you an update on a recent event that does with cross-county trips. So,
Oh, hello.
Joshua?
Is that Joshua?
That is not me. That was someone that was calling in.
Okay, there you go. Go for it, my friend.
Was there any comments? It sounded like someone had something.
Oh, yes. Any comments or questions before we turn it over to Josh? Okay, appearing none, you may go, sir.
All righty. Thank you everyone for having me. Josh Barber, MPO staff. I'm going to give a little overview of the Advantage Ride pilot program that was commissioned by the CTD. This pilot ran from January of 2019 through January of 2020. So just to give you a short introduction, Qatar did a statewide TD service analysis about August of 2018. And as part of that report, they recommended a pilot program for shared mobility for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. To follow up on that, the Florida legislature directed the CTD to procure transportation services based on that report and allocated $500,000 for a pilot program for shared mobility services. CTD, in coordination with Qatar, went through a relatively lengthy procurement process, and ultimately the TNC shared mobility company Userve was selected to provide services to eligible people in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Manatee counties. The program came out with a list of objectives, pretty standard, but you know, it was improve awareness and ability to use the transportation system through travel training, outreach, other methodologies. Have drivers who are trained in to understand the sensitivity and challenges associated with persons with IDD. They wanted to provide ways to schedule an immediate ride or a ride in the future, enhance safety, provide door-to-door services, and most importantly, transportation that crosses county lines. They wanted to ensure timely pickups and drop-offs, ensure that vehicles were accessible, of course, but also at the same time provide cost-effective transportation, and then also have the data to measure the transit performance, which has often been a challenge with local jurisdictions and transportation network companies. I'll give you a short overview of operations, the timeline. So after the procurement process, user was selected in January of 2019. They began taking calls and booking trips January 24th. Their first trip was January 29th of last year. They had wheelchair accessible vehicles by March 1st per their contract with the CTD. And then by June of 2019, they were making about 3,000 trips a month. That was their peak ridership was in June. By July, they recognized that the amount of demand on the system was costing them a lot of money. It was fiscally unsustainable. So they did some service changes. They instituted a copay. They did a few other things. And so we saw a slight decline in ridership, but still very strong. They instituted a trip cap as well for riders. So riders could only book so many trips per month. In October, they did some more service changes where they maxed out the number of trips that were allowed system-wide per month. I think it was something around 17,000 or so. And by October 17th, they had hit this trip cap, and so they recognized, hey, we can't, just end rides October 17th and have it reset in November. It's not fair. So in October, they lifted the trip caps and they announced an early end date for December. The program ended up going through at least January, with the fiscal kind of uncertainty. And so we'll give a quick overview of the performance of the system through October of 2019. October 2019 is when Cutter did the report on this pilot program. This map on the right shows the origin locations of all the trips taken between January and October of 2019. It's about 20,000 trips. You can see about 50% originated in Hillsborough County, 46% in Pinellas, and 4% in Manatee. You can see a few trips that originated outside of the county borders. There was a few up in Pasco and a few down in Sarasota County. 9% of the trips crossed county lines, inter-county trips. So you can see the directional arrows for those trips. So 814 trips from Hillsborough to Pinellas and 753 back. You can see the same thing for between Hillsborough and Manatee and Pinellas as well. By far the largest inter-county trips were between Hillsborough and Pinellas counties. About 1% of trips went outside of these three counties, so either started in Hillsborough, Manatee, and Pinellas and ended up outside of those jurisdictions. 13% of all the trips required wheelchair accommodations, and these 20,000 trips were spread over about 483 unique customers. And we'll do some conclusions. The program saw a rapid growth in demand, 3,000 trips per month by June. And this led to some challenges in the fiscal sustainability of the program that required some ongoing changes and some backtracking to those changes. And it's something to look out for in any future pilot programs or any sort of programs with these transportation network companies and on-demand service. But in despite of that, it had great customer satisfaction ratings. The on-time performance was approaching 99%. Persons receiving the service were very happy about the ability to call up a trip anytime they wanted and have someone outside their door in 15 or 30 minutes. The program, Cutter said the program demonstrated the need to explore more mobility options and demand for such services. clearly the demand for the program was very high, and so you know, the latent demand is there for on-demand services. So it's something to explore in the future. The pilot program ended in about January of this year. So it's no longer here, but CTD is administering a few new grant programs through the MCOR's funding to support similar projects if that's something the board is interested in, something that we can explore further. That's really all I got.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes, any questions? Go ahead, sir.
You know, given the clear, I mean, the clear success of this project, what's happening to all those people, those several thousand people that were using it? I mean, what are they doing now?
I think they're just getting trips through their local CTC.
I think that's Glenn.
Yes, it's fine.
That has, if you recall, Ms. Forsell used to tell us that, you know, this is the issue, that people are going to be isolated. That social isolation is a very sad part of our existence. Purpose for bringing you this presentation was to let you, as the board members, know that there is demand out there. When this program was introduced to us a year ago, I met with several young people who are students who are going to be traveling across to from USF here in Hillsborough to USF in St. Petersburg. For the very first time, they were going to be able to meet with other students who were on the had disabilities, and there was a support group issue, and they were so excited. The other thing is that I think with the disability that we're talking about in this particular pilot program, parents do provide the trips, but one of the things that was interesting about this particular program, I think, Joshua, is that there were 20-minute rides. So, you know, they weren't, but 20 minutes might be 5-10 miles. It depends on how you get there. But, you know, they're short trips, really. And it really tells us that there is a need for transit, door-to-door service, you know, and that's why I brought it forward. I think that with the MCORs, which is part of the work that this TD body worked on getting some money and be the enabling language. It's straight out of what we talked about. But we have at this time, we have not been able to really get much service out of that funding source. And I would like to advocate that we continue to explore and work on bringing to the CTD the needs of this county, Pinellas, Pasco, as well as in now Manatee, in terms of crossing those lines and perhaps finding ways for us to provide trips so that everyone can participate in all that this area has to offer. Mark Harshberger had sent me an email talking about, you know, some of the services that the blind take advantage of in terms of needing services and how to learn to use their equipment and to, you know, communicate, and that some of those services there's more capacity in, say, Pinellas County than in Hillsborough, and that is one of the challenges that the Division for the Blind does try to address each day. So we have, although the disability in this user pilot program was different, just to kind of smooth out that, you know, there's a need. And so we just want to be able to leave that message with the board, with you, the board, so that you can continue to advocate in your particular area, so that we continue to have this be the need for rides for persons with disabilities and the transportation disadvantage is there. We see it. A lengthy answer, sorry.
It looks like Mary.
No, it's
Ellen has a
good.
question.
Commissioner Smith, pleasure to have you here today, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi, Councilman Vieira. I was surprised to see that we could that there's a possibility of getting funding through MCORs. I'd only heard of MCORs being, you know, the giant roads to nowhere through the environmentally sensitive lands of the state, giant road projects. Can you speak a little bit to the breadth of MCORs and how it would be able to help grant us funding to provide local transportation disadvantaged programs?
Sure. So MCORS is actually seated at the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage, several $1 million. And the legislation reads, and I'm doing this from memory, the legislation reads that the CTD has the ability to provide grants or particular funding, and that's done once a year. And it lays out what the requirements of those grants are. Of course, cross-county trips is one of them. So that is a possibility. But yeah, and then after the CTD has used the money that's identified in this MCORS, then it goes to the other need, the roads and so on. So it's been an interesting, it's kind of strange, but it is strange. But that's part of that funding process that we need to continue to advocate with the CTD to try and get some more money into our coordinated contracting system so that we can provide cross-county trips. But that's, I think Scott and Karen, we did try to apply for something a few years ago. I don't know if Karen can or Scott can speak, because I thought we did apply.
Yeah, the funding that we got for the weekend service this year was through the Innovation and Service Development Grant is how the CTD is awarding that money. So the funding we got for weekend service was part of that money.
Thank you.
And this is Scott. Hey, Michelle, the Advantage Ride, that was specifically for Agency for Persons with Disabilities clients, am I correct?
That's correct.
Right, and that agency, they get their own funding for transportation. So just to clarify, Sunshine Line doesn't provide transportation to APD clients because they have their own funding for a lot of the things that they do on a daily basis. So I just wanted everyone to be clear on that.
This is Mike Lacey from APD. I just wanted a quick little clarification. They didn't require to be APD clients to utilize the service. We were just being utilized to verify their disability so they could utilize the service. Anyone who was 393 eligible can utilize UServe or Advantage Ride.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my purpose was merely to show, Joshua, if you could go back to that map. This date that, you know, we had 9% of the trips provided were across county lines. And that to me really shows you know, it's a number, it's data. And as we continue to hear, we have this cross-county, tri-county plan. We have continued over the past several years, I guess that's now 14 years, want to cross county lines. Each county has an asset that the other does not. And, you know, persons who cannot provide those trips for themselves, particularly those with disabilities, you know, are asking for those trips. So we want to just keep it alive and keep encouraging the conversation.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Okay, being none, I see here is our time for workshop adjournment. You know, since this is obviously a very difficult time for everybody, and I just wanted to point out the obvious, which is that the intent of our committee here is something that is very critical to not just times like these, but the aftermath. One of the things that really worries me about what we're going to be seeing after COVID, after God willing, we're all done with this, quote unquote, is the economic dislocation that we're going to be seeing. And then the idea that when the economy goes down, that government has to tighten its belt, which is true to a degree. But when it comes to people that are going to be hurt by the economy, I always say it's not a time to tighten the belt, it's a time to loosen it to help people. And we represent communities that are going to need that help severely and significantly. So I would just urge everybody to be vigilant in the future whenever it comes to advocating for sound, compassionate public policies, whenever it comes to transportation for people who are disadvantaged. Okay, Michelle, nothing else, correct? I wanted to make sure I'm not missing anything.
You're correct, Mr. Chairman. And just for
okay, great.
Clarification, we do need to call the workshop. We need to adjourn officially, however.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, we are hereby adjourned. Everybody, please stay safe, and thank you very much. And thank you to all of our wonderful MPO staff who put this together today, as I know that this technology is not easy. Trust me, because in the city, we're having our problems. And I'm sure that Commissioner Smith also knows about that with our friends in the county. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
We're not done. We just needed to call the workshop to close. Now we have to.
I'm sorry. Oh,
No,
well,
no
I was all okay. I'm sorry. Here, man, I'm sorry, guys. My mind is not functioning here today. Okay. I'm so sorry. When I saw the date February 21st, I thought that was the agenda from the last meeting here. Disregard. Okay. We call, that's funny. We call our regular meeting to order. Is there any public comment here? Okay. Being none, may I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
This is Glenn. I move to approve the minutes.
Gloria Mills,
May I have a
second.
second?
Gloria Mills,
Okay.
second.
We have a motion in this. Thank you, Ms. Mills. We appreciate it. Gloria. We need a second for approval of the minutes. Yes, ma'am. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. And now, Michelle, we don't need to take roll call, correct?
No, sir.
Okay, marvelous. Okay. I see here under action items, we have the CTC service rates with Ms. Smith.
Good morning. If Josh is going to bring up the PowerPoint, well, hopefully this goes well in this odd meeting environment. If you can just move to the next one. We do, every CTC in the state every year is required to submit a rate worksheet to the Florida Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged. The worksheet itself was not attached to the agenda, which we sometimes do. So if anyone wants it, it's a 6, 8, 7 page Excel spreadsheet. But if you would like a copy of the actual worksheet, Michelle or I can send it out to you. The worksheet itself is a format developed by the CTD, so we just plug in our numbers. We're required to do it every year. The rates are part of our grant, and they're included in the service plan, which Michelle mentioned you will approve in June. I think you can go to the next one. They're used to develop the rates. The Transportation Disadvantaged Trip and Equipment Grant is a reimbursement grant, which means that we provide a trip, and then we tell them we did this trip, and then they reimburse us a specific rate for different types of trips. There's a rate for an ambulatory trip, a wheelchair trip, and for 2 different group rate trips. It does not change how much grant funding we actually get. So regardless of what the rates are, we get the same total grant funding that's determined by formula for each CTC. And this coming year, it will be almost $1.3 million. It's the same exact amount as we're getting this year because they're working on the grant formula itself. So they've decided at their last meeting to keep everyone's funding exactly the same. So you can go to the next slide. The rates themselves are calculated based on estimated information for the 2021 budget. So what we do is we take our projected budget for next year, our projected trips and miles, input them into that form. So it uses it based on future information, not necessarily this year's information. And the grant, the way the formula works, someone is unmuted that probably should be muted. The way the rate worksheet works is the grant ends up paying a portion of the cost of the trip, and that percentage that they covered varies from year to year. It's around 80% lately. If you can go to the next one. So the rates calculated from the rate worksheet, and these are the rates that the TD grant will reimburse us, are $38.83 for an ambulatory trip, $66.56 for a wheelchair or lift trip. There's a group per passenger, which means it's a group of people, but it didn't quite hit 5 people to make it a group, sometimes because they booked it as a group and not everyone went. That's $18.77. And a group per group means that's what we charge for the entire group, not for each person, is $74.35. It is an increase from last year of about 6%. But those are like I said, the rates that the grant will reimburse us. Excuse me. Most of the increases from last year to this year are personnel increases. If you remember, we added 8 driver positions this year. So that we could improve some performance and so we could do some more trips. So those personnel increases, and the county also increased base pays for all the lower level positions so that everyone had a working wage. I'm not sure they actually called it that, but that was the intention. So most of the increases are payroll related increases. Yeah, if you can go to the next one. And what we just need the board to do today is to approve the rates. They have been approved. They've been reviewed by the CTD staff. They're required to look at it before we bring it to you. So they've looked at it, had their questions, and approved it for presentation to the coordinating board. So today we just need the coordinating board to approve the rates and then to allow us to include them in the service plan update in June. If you have any questions,
Okay.
I will try to answer them.
I have a question.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
In terms of those rates, Karen and Scott, I mean, are those like feasible in terms of, are they covering your costs, or are you working at a large deficit, or how is that in relation to running at is it covering your costs, or are you running at a deficit?
We cover our costs. The TD grant funds in an odd way, so that, like I said, it funds a portion of the trip, but the county funding covers the remaining county funding covers a lot of trips that we do in the first place outright, but then yeah, yeah. The other point is that because the funding is static, if they pay more per trip, then the county just covers more of the trips and they cover less of the trips. Because in the end, it's the same amount of funding overall.
Thank you.
If it affected the overall funding, it would matter more, but.
Commissioner Smith has a question. On the, I guess this is, yeah, this is the item backup. The household, there's at the bottom of our backup sheet, there's a little item of household income. If it's 125% or less of the federal poverty guidelines, they pay no copay. If there's more than 300% of federal poverty guidelines, there's no copay. So what are you saying? There's no copay for anyone? It's free for all riders over?
Oh, where'd that go? I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up, so I'm looking at the same page as you.
I'm looking
Cheryl's
at
right up. Yeah, they we're up when we update the that's the text out of the service plan that will be updated when we do it in June. And this year, actually going to the Board of County Commissioners meeting, the next meeting, we're eliminating the copayment. It was so that's why it looks so strange. It had normally been $0 and no fare, $2 or $5 for those three categories, and we're eliminating it this year. So there will be no copay. That's why it's just so explicitly typed in there, because it will be removing it.
Yeah, how is that?
May I provide some additional information, Smith and Ms. Smith? So a couple of months ago, the county accounting department, I guess, because I cannot remember their name, brought an item to the TD board and workshopped it through our subcommittee, saying that it cost more money, like several, I think it was $25 more to collect the money, the $2, the $1, the $5 amount. And so they showed that they could save money by not collecting a copay. So this board approved that. I want to say it was like October last year.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and unfortunately, COVID's gotten in the way. So
it's taken a little while to get it to the board, but right,
yeah.
It's consistent with what this board already approved in the fall.
Like that. It was a request of the quality assurance, I think was the name of the group of the county. It said, this is costing us a one person equal amount of money to collect the funding. It doesn't cover the cost. So anyway, that was the request, and it was approved, supported by the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board.
Thank you. That was before I got here, so I appreciate the background on that. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that she was updating that in the same item, or I would have mentioned that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It looks like Deborah has her hand raised.
Hi, Karen. It's Deborah LaKenta. How are you?
Good.
Hey, I have a question with the rates. I see the group per group rate. Is that something that we should be tracking for the AOR? I don't recall that being on, like, is that something that we need to be tracking when we submit our trips to you at the end of the year for the AOR?
No, it only changes the way we bill that grant, but it doesn't change the way we count overall trips.
Okay, that was just a question. I haven't seen that before. And then what is considered a group per group? Is it over, I think I missed it. I heard, what is the group per passenger? I see it's this lower rate. Is that below 5, you said?
Yeah, because in Hillsborough County, the group is defined as 5 people. So when
Okay.
the groups fall below 5, or the group per group is when they're all going from the same place to the same place. So group
Yeah.
per passenger can also be if they're going from multiple places to one place.
Okay,
That will also be group per passenger.
okay. Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Question?
You're up, Mr. Chairman.
Question? I have another additional question. Gloria Mills,
Yes.
what is the AOR? I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Oh, the annual operating report. The report that we
Okay.
present in October.
Thank you. Yes,
Mhm.
I'm familiar with the annual operating report. Thank you.
Yeah, too many acronyms.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm sorry. I was on mute. I apologize. I was asking, Ms. Smith, we need a motion on 4A, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay. May I have a motion to that effect? May I have a motion for 4A? Anybody wish to make it?
So,
No motion to
so
accept.
moved.
Was there a motion made?
Dave Newell, I made the
Okay.
motion to approve.
Thank you, David. And do we have a second?
Second, Gloria Mills.
Thank you, Gloria. Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we move to 4B. Mr. Barber.
Hello, everybody, again. So this is the Unified Planning Work Program. The Unified Planning Work Program is adopted every 2 years. It outlines our major planning tasks. It essentially serves as a scope of services to FDOT and FHWA on what we'll be doing with our federal and state funding for the next 2 years. It becomes effective July 1st, 2020, and it'll run through June 30th, 2022. A major component of it is coordinating our federally funded planning tasks. That's through the MPO, HART, FDOT, and it also includes all our certifications and assurances in complying with federal and state rules and regulations. Just to give you an overview, the UPWP is divided into 6 tasks. Task 1 deals with transportation planning management. So that's our grants, our state and federal certification, the development of this document. Task 2 deals with systems and corridor planning. That's complete streets, intermodal, freight, transportation demand management, TD, corridor studies, environmental, ITS. Task 3 deals with long-range transportation planning and data collection. So we just went through our 2045 LRTP update recently, so that was included in this tasks. Task 4 is our TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan or program. That's 5 years of programming of all the transportation improvements in the county, project prioritization, coordination with the state, Task 5 is our major public participation. So that's the MPO board, our great committees, the USF Fellowship Program, which we have 2 fellows budgeted for this year, updates to our website, our newsletter, our social media and public outreach. And then task 6 is local and regional coordination and planning. So that's the chair's coordinating committee, TBARDA, the ongoing regional LRTP, our public participation plan, our measures of effectiveness, and regional multi-use trails committee, those kind of items. And you can see how these tasks break up in our budget. I think the big item here is recognizing that 90% of our federal and state grants are going towards planning activities. There's only 10% of the budget that's going to managing the MPO. You can see the breakdown. The biggest one is system and corridor planning, followed by our long-range transportation planning. Here's an overview of the major projects we've completed over the course of the last UPWP, with the most major, of course, being our 2045 long-range transportation plan update. But you can also see other major projects here, the air quality benefits of green noise walls, our CTC evaluation for this board, the community health atlas, the Hart's South Shore transit study reevaluation, Resilient Tampa Bay, the PPP and MOE, state of the system, the USF campus autonomous vehicle feasibility study. So we've gotten a lot accomplished over the last 2 years. And then projects that are underway. So these are projects that are carrying over from the last UPWP into this UPWP. Our equity scorecard that we're working on with Qatar, the regional LRTP, Vision Zero corridor studies for unincorporated county, the Plant City Transit Feasibility Plan, all currently ongoing and will be included in the next UPWP for funding. This gives an overview of our funding sources and amounts over the next 2 years. PL is planning dollars, STP is state transportation or surface transportation. That's federal dollars, FTA, and CTD, which comes from the state. You can see the total budget in fiscal year 2021. It's about $600,000 more, $500,000 more than the following fiscal year. This is primarily due to funds rolling over from the last UPWP. So we took a request for projects to our MPO committees back in, I think it was March or February, requesting, hey, what do you all want to see in the next UPWP? What projects do you want to do? You can see the BPAC made a motion for best practices for street sweeping, bike lane maintenance, livable roadways, suggested school safety study audits on an ongoing basis, a safety and park speed zone study, electric vehicle charging best practices. CAC made a motion to study uniform bicycle lanes countywide, and the TAC made a motion on looking at vulnerability and resiliency of county roadways. And then as well, we also take requests every 2 years from all our local jurisdictions and HART. Hillsborough County requested a countywide truck route study and a study of Lumsden Boulevard. City of Tampa, comprehensive school safety study for 5 schools in the city, speed management, Vision Zero, green infrastructure research, a transportation innovation speaker series, and advanced parking management system feasibility. Temple Terrace rolled over some requests from last year as well on trail feasibility and alignment for between Temple Terrace and USF. And they requested an update to their multimodal mobility fee as well. Plant City, also requests came from the 2019 update. That's a Florida Strawberry Festival Special Use District transportation study and a canal connector trail feasibility study. And then Hart requested a bus stop inventory assessment, tri-area circulator, an on-demand downtown circulator study, a study of the CSX rail service, ferry services, and streetcar extension. So we rolled all that in to our work program, and we're working on prioritization now. But for these are our critical path projects over the next 2 years. These are essential projects that the MPO needs to do. This includes data analytics, a data platform for performance monitoring. We'll be doing an update to our ITS master plan, which will be a smart cities master plan. We're moving traffic counts for the county and the city into this next fiscal year. And our normal TDSP update, which will include integration of mobility as a service into the plan. We have funds budgeted for 2 students for the USF from the USF Department of Urban Planning for the fellowship. Vision Zero implementation, completing this Plant City transit plan, and the Chair's Coordinating Committee planning in coordination with Pinellas and Pasco. And then here's some potential projects that we're working on currently prioritizing. After funding all of our essential critical path projects, there's about $895,000 left over the next 2 fiscal years to put towards these projects. That's city requests, county requests, and requests from the board. So the total cost of these projects is about $980,000. So there might be 1 or 2 that's not going to make it over the next 2 fiscal years. This went to the board during their March meet or their most recent April meeting, and we're taking requests and project prioritization from them currently. But you can see the breakdown of the study and the potential studies and the preliminary cost estimates. A big one was the 275 Boulevard conversion study, a phase 1 that's kind of like a problem identification process. It's about $150,000. Community health impacts of the 2045 LRTP, storm evacuation forecasting, shelter-in-place scenarios, freight supply chain mapping, resilience, school safety, trail feasibility, electric vehicle facilities, the Plant City Southeast Master Plan, transportation analysis, and then a Hart bus stop study. So just to give you an overview of the schedule, we're bringing the UPWP for review to all our MPO committees this month. The MPO board will adopt our final UPWP May 13th, 2020 at their board meeting. And the new UPWP will become effective July 2020 and will be ending June of 2022. So at this point, we'd like to take some comments and suggestions on priorities from the potential projects and studies, and then also we'd like an action for approval of the fiscal year 21 and 22 UPWP and forwarding to the MPO for adoption.
Thank you for that, Josh. We appreciate it. Any questions or comments?
Commissioner Smith,
Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. When this was presented to the MPO board, I was still hopeful that our county commission was going to pass pass along a backup tax referendum the following day to keep our surtax funds alive. That did not happen, and a lot of people are pessimistic about the possibility of the Supreme Court letting our surtax stand, and now we don't have a county alternative to put on the ballot. So how does this change I mean, you were, the MPO was to get 1% of those funds. How does this unified work program change? If are there projects on here that were slated to be funded through that funding source? How does this change if the Supreme Court strikes down the surtax?
Allison, do you maybe want to take a crack at that, or I can?
Let me take a crack at it, and then you guys jump in. Good morning, Commissioner Smith. I'm hearing a little feedback. I hope it's not me. Everything you see here, the critical path projects as well as the potential projects are not counting on the sales tax. We're only projecting this budget based on what's available in our MPO budget. That's why we showed you this list and showed that we have a little bit of a shortfall. So the potential studies list has, 980,000, and we have about 895,000. So pretty close. This is not reliant on it. It's on the surtax budget. But the jurisdiction projects that you see and the committee requests, those are the ones that don't have the budget tied to them right now. So we could pull those and put this list, or we could keep this list as it is. The only thing that we hope not to change is the critical path project, if we really need those to be done for our compliance activities. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Are you looking for a motion about priorities? I know that the MPO board members were asked to provide priorities for the additional money here, some and additional list of studies. Are you looking for a motion, or should we all communicate separately, or those of us who are on the MPO board, should we figure we've had our say and let the other committee members have theirs? What are you looking for?
We're asking for comments from each of the recommending committees, and then we are asking for a list of priorities from MPO board members. So some committees have forwarded their requests to Beth and the board members, and then I think we're looking for the top 5 priorities from the, sorry, I give you a little feedback, from the actual MPO board members. But today we would also ask the committee to move this draft onto the MPO for approval. That's the other action we're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Well, my only other comment would be, while I still have the floor, is that from the perspective of this board and the priorities of transportation disadvantaged customers, it seems like there's a few of these potential studies that pop out as especially beneficial to transportation disadvantage, and I would point out the HART bus stop assessment, the community health impacts of the long-range transportation plan. I think now more than ever, we're learning that air pollution from automobiles and certain interstate projects can actually raise the risks of increase people's vulnerability to respiratory viruses like COVID. And but there would certainly be other health impacts that would be interesting and important to this board. And finally, the update, the storm evacuation forecast and shelter scenarios might have special implications to prioritize from this board. So I'll just point out those 3 as being, I think, especially important to this committee.
Yeah, thank you for your comment on that. I think we will be adding that to the committee reports that go to the MPO in May.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have a comment?
I do. It's
yes, sir.
Glenn again. And Commissioner Smith, I think just because you're on the MPO board, you get to take a different angle on this. So I think if you get a chance to look at things with different eyes and add comments, so there's nothing inappropriate about that. I think that's a good thing. My thought is, and I remember looking at these projects before, one of the things, because you have great people doing it, they're some really highly skilled and interesting people, but what was sort of missing, and I think it's the sort of element that can help things like county commissioners and city council people make decisions, is a lot of these projects were not including the longer term cost benefit analysis, at least of the ones I'm familiar with. There's a number on here that I'm not. But I think, they look at the hard costs quite often, but they don't often try to add an element, and it's challenging is partly why. But if they could look into, the longer term cost benefit and include that in those studies, I think that would help when people are making decisions about taxes. And also when people are making decisions about taxes, I think it's helpful when politicians remind people that these sorts of projects are not things or things that people are getting for free, but they are in fact what you're getting for your dollar, and that's often not emphasized as well. So I probably said too many things in one little tidbit of these things. I apologize, but in general, my thought is that long-term cost benefit, please try to figure out a way to include that in these studies where it's not included.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Glenn. I actually am on the same page with you. These are the scope estimates for what the projects would be, so we can build into the scope, say, components of the cost benefit analysis. And I think that's a really good suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Okay. Mr. Barber, we needed a motion, correct?
Yes, that is correct, please.
Okay, a motion just so that when I call it, to what effect?
Approval of the fiscal year 21 and 22 UPWP and forward to the MPO for adoption.
May I have a motion to that effect, please?
So move. That this is Dr. Gordon.
Okay. May I have a second?
I'll second. It's Glenn Brown.
Thank you, Glenn. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Barber. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Michelle?
everybody.
We move to C. Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I needed to unmute myself.
That's all right.
So today we have another annual requirement of our grants and all the different things that bring money into Hillsborough County from the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage, and this is our grievance procedures. Next slide, please. Thank you. The purpose of this, of having our grievance procedures, is to provide an impartial body to hear complaints and make recommendations to the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged on disputes that concerning service rendered. And that includes things like denial of trips, things like my trip was late or tardy, just to give you some of the examples of things that can be are called disputes. Next slide, please. The purpose of this is to make you aware that there are grievance procedures and they are in your packet. The other is that we need to ask the chairman to designate members of this body to serve on the grievance subcommittee. We are required, when we receive a complaint, to within 15 days respond, and that means that we always have to be ready. We have not had a complaint or a grievance in the last 10 years, might be 11 now, but we must be ready. So our members of that body, our volunteers, are Gloria Mills, Nancy Pacifico, Mark Harshbarger, Craig Forcell, and Nancy Castellano. And my request of this body today is, next slide, to recommend that the chairman appoint the members and to confirm that you did receive your transportation disadvantage grievance procedures.
Great. And Michelle, do we need a motion for that recommendation?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do we have any questions before I call the motion or ask to? Anybody? Okay. There being none, may I have a motion to that effect, please?
Dave Newell, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, David. May I have a second?
Cassandra Blaylock, second.
Thank you, ma'am. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And Michelle, so I assume that means that Gloria, Nancy, Mark, Craig, and Nancy would be appointed, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, next we move to bylaws. Michelle, you may proceed.
Thank you. Just bring up that. Okay. The bylaws are again one of the annual requirements of this of our relationship with the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage. I always think of April as being our housekeeping item month. So next slide, please. The purpose is that we need to let the members of the TD board know that we do have bylaws, and they were attached to the mail out to your agenda. It outlines your duties that you received in our workshop. It outlines the membership. There are 19 members of this body, and they're all required by state law. In the bylaws are the rules and procedures, which were nested in the MPO structure. So there are things like, we need a chair and a vice chair and rules of order. That was all provided to you, and are normal structures of any committee. Next slide. So my request today is that you acknowledge that you have received the bylaws and readopt them, just so that we know that you did get them. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any questions on this? Okay, being none, may I have a motion to that effect?
This is Dr. Gordon. Move that. Dr. Gordon, move that. The TD board.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. So you were making the motion? You were making the motion?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. May I have a second?
This is Emily Hugard. I second the motion.
Thank you, Emily. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we move to status reports. Mr. Newell, you may proceed, sir.
Okay, well, hopefully you can all hear me. Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to give a status report on the Section 5310 grant program. We had another round this year, and as most of you know, this is a yearly allocation given out by the Federal Transit Authority Administration, FTA, and the FDOT is the designated recipient of the funds that come to this District 7, and we receive applications for not-for-profit transit agencies as well as the local CTCs and transit agencies such as HART and PSDA for funding, primarily for vehicles, but also for operating funds, for positions like a mobility manager position, or potentially equipment that would be needed to continue to provide transportation in the area. And so this year, We had an application that was due on January 15th, and we did it a little bit different this year to where everything was due to be submitted online. We have a program now called a Transit system, and so everybody had an account created for them, and they were able to turn in their application there. We had 38 different applications, which is substantially higher than there was last year or in previous years. And the typical procedure is the applications will come in, and then we have a group of anywhere between 4 and say maybe 8 people who will review the application information and score them based off of the merits of the project, the need of that agency, and the available funding that's available to be dispersed out in different types. This year we had a total of $2.78 million to be given out in federal funds, and that sounds like a good chunk of money, but it definitely goes by really quickly, and it gets spent out really well. We had, like I said, 38 applications from, I want to say, about 30 different agencies. Some agencies applied for multiple things. What's something to keep in mind of that $2.78 million that we had to give out, more than 50%, actually 55% of it at a minimum must be given out for capital purchases, things like vehicles. Mobility manager does actually fall under capital, which is wonderful. And things like software or hardware, maybe maintenance items for an agency that may be doing their own maintenance. So as a kind of a breakdown, we do our scoring. Michelle Ogilvie was a portion of the scoring this year, and Tracy Noyes, who I also have on the phone with me, also did some scoring this year. As a breakdown for that, we awarded 30 different awards to 22 different agencies. I think that's wonderful. That's a little bit higher than what we've been able to do in the past. So I'm very pleased with that. So we have a breakdown that Hillsborough County this year actually received the most number of awards. There were 9 different agencies in Hillsborough County that received awards, 15 awards split out between those 9 different agencies. The total amount that was awarded to them was $1.74 million. That includes the local match that goes in there. The local match is based off of what type of award is given out. So anything that is listed as capital is covered 90% by either FTA, a combination of FTA and the state. And then the agency that received the award would have to pay 10% of that. And then any operating funds that were given out is a 50-50 split. So the agency would be required to match the same amount that they were given by FTA, or vice versa there. So of the actual federal and state money that went out to Hillsborough County, it was actually $1.168 million, which is wonderful. I'm very pleased to say that. We had a large number of replacement vehicles that we were given out, and that's good in my opinion, because that means that the vehicles that are being replaced have been effectively and efficiently used to their useful life. We try to double check to make sure that the vehicles that are being replaced are not just not being used, and so this means that the agencies that are getting these awards are being good stewards of what they were given in the past and expending that out, and that's something that we really like to see. There were a few mobility managers that were given out in Hillsborough County, and I like that as well, because I think that is a critical position to help people get the trips they need, to coordinate with the CTC to make sure that we don't have overlapping trips or maybe wasted or inefficient service that's going out. So I'm very pleased with what was given out. We spent every penny that we had, so that's also a really nice thing. And one other point, I know that I said we had given out 15 awards to 9 different agencies. There's also another agency that didn't necessarily directly fall into Hillsborough, but serves Hillsborough, and kind of goes back to those cross-county trips that we were discussing. We have an agency that resides in Pasco County, but does a good number of trips between Pasco and Hillsborough County, or Pasco and Pinellas County, to go to the VA hospitals and to Moffett, a few other medical trips as well. So you can kind of include that in on the awards as well. And it's definitely a good thing to see, breaking down those barriers so that agencies don't have to stay in that county that they currently reside in, and that those that need trips can get that service that they really need. So we are waiting on approval from Tallahassee to say that these awards that we've given out are approved, and once that happens, then they will send that off to FTA, who will then do the same thing. And the hope is that by sometime around August, we will be told that all the awards have been approved. There's not typically any change. And then right around September, the money will become available, hopefully. And we can start giving out those awards and creating contracts for those to get operating funding. So I don't really have much else to say. If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them. And
any questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's it.
Thank you, David. We appreciate that, my friend. Any questions for Mr. Newell? Okay. Thank you very much for that, David. We appreciate it. Okay.
May I ask a question, Dave?
Sure.
Hey, Dave. What was the reason, do you think, you had such an uptick in the number of applications? And was it agencies applying for replacements that kind of hit like a cycle, or was it new applicants that have never been in the 5310 program before?
That's it. Yeah, we had a little bit of both. So we had some new applicants, which means that people are out there talking, and that's great. It means that people feel comfortable, agencies feel comfortable being able to apply for the funds. So we had 3 or 4, I believe, brand new agencies that we had not dealt with apply. And then we had some agencies that have not applied for 4 or 5 years. That kind of leads to why we had the replacement vehicles be such a high percentage of those that we've given out. These are agencies that will say applied in 2014 and received a vehicle and have now used the vehicle for 5, 6, 7 years, and that vehicle is now starting to break down. They're starting to need to replace that vehicle, and so they're only asking for vehicles just a little in advance of when they need it. I can definitely appreciate that. And we also had a few agencies that applied for multiple things, so that accounted for some of the extra number. So if an agency is asking for vehicles, but then also operating assistance, so that accounts for 2 applications that would come in. So we have a few more agencies that have now started asking for operating funds, and maybe 2 different projects, so preventative maintenance and vehicles as well to go along with it. So possibly it was that the system worked pretty well, and so they felt comfortable applying for more things. I can't say exactly why, but it's a little bit of everything why there were more applications.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Okay, now we move to old business and new business. The next meeting will be June 26th, 2020. And now we go to adjournment. Thank you very much, everybody, for your work today. And there being nothing else, by all appearances, we hereby adjourn again. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Well,
Thank you,
continue to
everybody.
well, everyone.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great weekend.
Be
Stay
safe.
safe.